I am back. I've been gone for a couple of days, but I think each and every one of you going to understand why I was gone for a couple of days, and it was holiday related. I had family over. That was nice. Had dinner. Had just I stuffed myself silly. Had a little too much wine to drink as well. Made a great broccoli casserole for Christmas dinner. A small family gathering, just my parents and myself. They're here for a brief while, um, and we decided to just do our little thing. We would have invited other family members over, but you know, nobody wants to. Everybody's a little concerned about the COVID. All understood, and oh well. So, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays once again to you all. And I hope that 2021 for each and every one of you, as well as myself, will be better than the year 2020. I don't see how it could be worse, but needless to say, and I mean, it was just one hell of a year. I think that we're going to remember that. And there's a lot I'd like to talk about. I want to talk about that $2,000 stimulus, but I'm going to have to do that later on. I want to talk about, other issues, the shenanigans of Donald Trump, who is shenanigans extraordinaire number one. Him refusing to acknowledge that he lost the election. I mean, just there are all kinds of things to be discussing. COVID itself, the vaccine, just the worst strain of COVID that's apparently coming out of the UK or in the UK right now. So there's a lot to talk about. So add to this scenario, the world is really upside down, as I just explained to you in 2020. But you know what? It's quite a sad day when Sarah Palin manages to make more sense than Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. Well, it's likely to be a one-time thing, but it's been achieved. At one time, Sarah Palin was in favor of our U.S. government, you know, arresting and prosecuting and possibly even executing Julian Assange of WikiLeaks. Remember Julian Assange, WikiLeaks? That's what I want to talk about. Well, one would think that I've taken maybe one too many hits of LSD, but apparently, it's hard to believe what I'm hearing. But Sarah Palin is urging President Donald Trump to pardon Julian Assange. And if there's any decency to President Donald Trump deep down, not only would he pardon Julian Assange while he's at it, he would pardon Ed Snowden too. And we'll wait and see. I think it'll be the right thing to do. But to Sarah Palin, if you're listening, for many years I've shown total disdain for you, and I'm being very polite saying that. As of this week, you will not hear me complain about you, but you will hear me actually praising you. And what irony it is to say this, because irony is defined these days on partisan lines. And I would say, especially in the post 9/11 world. I mean, during the George W. Bush presidency, most Republicans, including Sarah Palin, were pro war, pro torture, pro spying. The Democrats, about half of them were for roughly the same thing as George W. Bush and the Republicans, but they wanted to put a nicer smiley face to it. In other words, make it more politically correct, more sensitive, more woke. And they're kind of still on that kick. During the Obama presidency, some conservatives grew tired of the neocons, and and like even during the Bush presidency, Tucker Carlson was one of the earliest critics of the Iraq War. I mean, Pat Buchanan was for sure in the early days, but then people like Tucker Carlson became critical, and there were starting to be a stirrings within the right and they started to get divided on issues like the Iraq War, the Afghan War, whether we should torture, the whole idea of domestic spying, the Patriot Act, that sort of thing. How George W. Bush was conducting himself, and there was starting a rift in the Republican Party in that regard. Um, Sarah Palin was pretty much rubber stamping the George W. Bush line at that time. As the governor of Alaska, I would, and she would remain that. I wouldn't really have much to say about her, but she entered the national stage when John McCain chose her to be his running mate. And the thing about it is that, they pretty much towed the line of George W. Bush. I would say that maybe John McCain, he is a war criminal. John McCain, he tried to toe the Bush line, but he was trying to be nice about it. I don't see how murdering a 500,000 people halfway across the globe is nice. And I'm not being partisan saying this because, yes, I say, fuck George W. Bush and fuck John McCain for having blood on their hands with regard to the people of Iraq. I say fuck Hillary Clinton too on the Democratic side for voting for that war. And same thing with Madeleine Albright, who was the Secretary of State, who said having those hundreds of thousands of innocent people die in Iraq, it was worth it. That was her words. And shame on Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks giving softball questions to that Madeleine Albright. Shame on her. You sold out, Anna Kasparian. But let me get back to what I was saying. You started to see a rift during the latter Bush years, and it still continued during the Obama years. I mean, when you had Glenn Beck on his radio show on saying, liberals, you were right. I was wrong on the Iraq War. Of course, when Glenn Beck thinks you have to go invade Iran, it sort of made that Iraq War denunciation kind of not sincere. Let me go on. So anyway, Sarah Palin, with her Tea Party movement, she remained during the Obama years, and dare I say, maybe even during the first several years of the Trump presidency, is pretty much a knee-jerk neocon in wanting to have a U.S. presence in the Middle East and basically continuing the Bush Cheney doctrine. And she was at a rally years ago, sponsoring a rally where she was calling for the U.S. not to have the nuclear arms deal with Iran. And as I said, you have Sarah Palin, Phil Robertson, and Ted Cruz, all of them saying, no to this nuclear arms deal with Iran. To make sure that Iran limits their nuclear weapons capability. I knew they were wrong. But people can change, I guess. And when Trump entered the national stage in 2015 to announce his candidacy for president, this is where things started to get really weird for the Republicans. It wasn't exactly newsflash in 2008 and 2012 for Congressman Ron Paul of Texas to be the anti-war voice within the Republicans, but they were maligned. The Ron Paul supporters were maligned to the side as considered part of the fringe. Well, as 2016 came about, Rand Paul being one of the Republican presidential candidates in the primaries, that wasn't so highly unusual at that point because there was starting to build an anti-war sentiment within the Republican Party. Now, I'm speaking about this on partisan lines, and it relates to Sarah Palin's, you know, epiphany, so to speak, about this. But I used to be one of those people that would sit there, Democrats good, Republicans bad. That was me in the late '80s, early to mid 1990s. As I tipped out of the Democratic Party and became an overt socialist, even though I was like, "Fuck the two-party system, Democrats are sellout." It was still, I look at the Republicans and like, those motherfuckers need to be defeated, and there was nothing that the Republicans could do that would say rah 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 for them or anything like that. George W. Bush happened to change that in the sense that I started to go to anti-war protests during the Bush years, and not only were uh, the protests consisting of a bunch of left-wing hipster kids and emo kids and elderly Vietnam War vets and all kinds of radicals and lefties and peace activists, social justice warriors. You all doing this big anti-war progressive kumbaya. And with having libertarians out there wasn't so hard to believe. Ran across libertarians, and that wasn't hard to believe because all these years of activism, I would run across libertarians at anti-death penalty rallies because I'm opposed to capital punishment. I'll run across, one time, I my table in Carborough, North Carolina, at the Gay Pride uh, pro, um, festival that they were having. You know, had a Socialist Party had a table right beside the Libertarian Party, and so just we were just talking about how the Libertarians and the Socialists. Hey, this is one of the areas where we're both pro LGBTQ rights, and hey, unite with other people when you don't quite agree. But fast forward that to the Bush years, and you're going to these anti-war rallies, and you started to see people who are strident conservative Republican types that got tired of Bush and Cheney, and they were at these events. We would know them later on. We'll be calling them paleocons later on. Still, a lot of people don't know what a paleocon is, but it's an opposite of a neocon. And so, you know, and I discovered when talking to libertarians and some of these paleocons that it was not just being against the war. There was some other things, protectionism of the economy, things along those lines. Corporatist abuse, and they had some of those concerns. Yeah, they're not going to believe in single payer Medicare for all. And depending on who you talk to, which region of the country, there's going to be quite a few of them that are not going to be particularly hot and trot with the idea of labor unions. But you know what? If they if there are some issues where where there is some overlap and you're there, don't make enemies with these people. I mean, these people are there to fight the good fight. And as far as I was concerned, I started to realize, anybody who opposed the Bush doctrine, for the most part, I had to consider them an ally, even if they were on the right. So when Trump entered the stage in 2016, I guess he kind of stole Rand Paul's fire because that was a big piece of what Rand Paul was all about, was being anti-war. It was hilarious seeing Donald Trump, destroy Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, who I'm more charitable toward individual Republicans. But when I see Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, and Jeb Bush, uh, you know, three different men with three different personalities. All of them are corporatist motherfuckers. All of them are neocons. All of them are pieces of shit, and all of them worse than Donald Trump. But the thing about it is that this kind of how the populist right morphed, and Sarah Palin, going back to her, when she's actually getting a revelation about herself, about what she did in the past was wrong, I say thank you, Sarah Palin, for doing this, and I hope that your words will see to it that Julian Assange become a free man. And I say the same thing about Ed Snowden too. But the thing about it is, um, thank you for evolving, at least on this issue. And I hope that as the years come, that we don't ever walk back to that time period of the George W. Bush, Dick Cheney years, which was one of the darkest political times in my lifetime. And I'm 51 years old. I'm about to be 52 in a few months. It was one of the darkest times in remembrance and the Obama haters and the Trump haters are going to both say that the Obama haters of the right and the Trump haters of the left are going to hate me for saying this. But both Obama and Trump were an improvement to George W. Bush. That's how bad George W. Bush was. And I have said that back in 2008. Anything was going to be an improvement to George W. Bush, probably for the next 50 years. Uh, Let me go on to say, and I'm glad that Sarah Palin has found the wisdom to realize that Julian Assange is a good man, and that for freedom of speech and for the First Amendment, we need to support Julian Assange and support, because if we don't, and Julian Assange is put behind bars for indefinitely or even executed, that's a bad precedent, and we will all be at a loss as a result. And I don't want to see the day comes where our First Amendment become totally meaningless. And unfortunately, there are times I feel like we're speeding toward it. Whether it's a bunch of silly college age social justice warriors screaming about people hurt feelings, or whether we're talking about old white men with suit and ties wanting to go put you in prison and fining you $250,000 for engaging in boycotts against Israel or something along those lines. So that's what I got to say about this. The First Amendment is important, and once again, this is one of the few times you'll hear me say anything praiseworthy of Sarah Palin, but I hope that her words reaches the ears of President Trump and Julian Assange is pardoned. If you like what you heard, press like and comment. If you were angry over what I had to say, well, just be angry and comment anyway. Feel free to share the contents of this channel. As a First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you that if you are passionate about something, you have a platform, utilize it. If you're passionate about something and you don't have a platform, create that platform, utilize it, because we're the muckrakers of our time. And wishing each and every one of you a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Subscribe to this channel. And remember, I am American Social Democracy. Until next time, peace. Bernie Sanders for president in the year 2024.